Dad, can I buy a hot dog for that man? What the billionaire dad discovers is unbelievable. The Saturday sun beat down on Daniel Carter's face as he parked the black BMW in front of Riverside Park. The engine was still humming softly when Emily jumped out of the back seat, her messy blonde hair shining like gold in the morning light. "Daddy, come on," she shouted, running towards the colorful playground equipment. Daniel sighed and grabbed his phone from the dashboard. 3 unread messages from the company, 2 missed calls. A Saturday that was supposed to be just for her, but work never stopped. "Slow down, Emily," he called back, locking the car with the remote. The girl was already far ahead, her small legs racing across the green lawn. Daniel followed, typing a quick reply on WhatsApp. "Meeting Monday at 8 a.m. Confirm?" The park was crowded. Families were scattered everywhere. Children were screaming with joy, and dogs were running free. Daniel found an empty bench near the playground and sat down, keeping Emily in his line of sight while he answered another message. His consulting firm had grown a lot in the last 2 years. Big contracts, important clients, money pouring in. But that meant his phone was ringing all the time, even on weekends. "Daddy, can you push me on the swing?" Emily yelled, waving from the blue metal structure. "I'll be right there, sweetie," Daniel answered without looking up from the screen. Another message. This time it was about the contract with the city. $300,000 on the line. He couldn't ignore it. Emily climbed onto the swing by herself and started to sway slowly, kicking her legs back and forth. Her big, innocent blue eyes shone with delight, even without her father's help. Daniel typed furiously. The client wanted a change in the project. That meant redoing everything, a lost weekend. "Daddy!" Emily shouted again, this time louder. "Just a minute, honey." He was almost finished with his reply when he felt a small hand tugging on his blue polo shirt. "Daddy, look over there." Daniel looked up, annoyed, ready to ask for one more minute. But the expression on Emily's face made him put his phone away immediately. The girl was pointing to a bench across the path. An elderly man was sitting there, far too thin, with dirty, torn clothes. His hands trembled slightly as he stared at the ground. His white hair was disheveled, and he had an old plastic bag next to him. "He looks sad, Daddy." Daniel glanced over and then turned his attention back to his phone. A homeless man. The city was full of them. It wasn't his problem. "Come on, Emily. Let's go play on the slide." But the girl didn't move. She kept looking at the man, frowning the way she always did when she was thinking about something important. "Daddy, he's hungry. Can I buy a hot dog for him?" Daniel didn't even look up this time. He was typing a reply to Marcus, his business partner, about the project changes. "Sure, sure. Just don't take too long." He held out his wallet without looking, took out a $20 bill and handed it to Emily. The girl took the money carefully and ran off toward the food cart on the other side of the park. Daniel took the opportunity to make a call. Marcus answered on the second ring. "Hey man, I saw your messages. What's this mess with the city contract?" "It's complicated, Marcus. They want to change everything. We're going to have to work this weekend." "Again? Man, you need to get some rest." "I can't. There's too much money at stake." Daniel talked for another 10 minutes, explaining the project details. The client wanted a new approach, more modern, more expensive. It meant redoing presentations, hiring more people, working nights and weekends. When he hung up, Emily hadn't returned yet. He scanned the area and found her in line at the food cart, counting the money in her small hands. She had a serious expression on her face, as if she were doing something very important. Good girl. At least she was busy, and he could work in peace. He went back to his phone. 3 more messages. One from the office case, another from a new client wanting to schedule a meeting for Monday, and a third from Sarah, Emily's nanny, asking if she could have next Friday off. Daniel smiled as he typed the replies. Business never stopped. That's what he loved about his job. There was always something happening, always money coming in, always new opportunities. A few minutes later, Emily came running back with 2 hot dogs in her hands. She took a bite of one and held the other carefully, as if it was something very precious. "Who's the other one for, honey?" "For the man on the bench," Daniel chuckled. That's just how kids were. Soft-hearted. Emily always worried about everyone. At school, she shared her snacks with her classmates. At home, she left water out for the birds in the yard. "Okay, go ahead and come right back. Daddy needs to make one more call." Emily nodded and ran off down the path. Daniel watched her approach the bench where the elderly man was sitting. He saw her stop in front of him, offering the snack with a big smile on her face. What a sweet girl. Her mother would have been proud. Daniel returned to his phone to answer another message, but something made him look up again. Emily was sitting on the bench next to the man. They seemed to be talking. The man had accepted the hot dog and was chewing slowly. Daniel smiled. His daughter wasn't afraid of anything. She could talk to anyone, anywhere. It was a good quality, but one that sometimes worried him. He went back to typing but couldn't concentrate. Something was bothering him. Maybe it was the way the man sat, or the way he held the hot dog, or the way he tilted his head to listen to Emily. Daniel shook his head. He was imagining things. He needed to focus on work, but he couldn't. His eyes kept drifting back to the bench where Emily was talking with a stranger, and the more he looked, the more a strange feeling grew in his chest. That's when it happened. The man lifted his face to smile at Emily. The sun hit his face directly, illuminating every wrinkle, every mark of time. Daniel felt his phone slip from his hands and fall to the ground with a thud. It couldn't be. He stood up slowly, as if in slow motion. His eyes couldn't look away from the elderly man's face. His heart was beating so hard he could hear it in his ears. The same brown eyes, the same slightly crooked nose, the same small mark on his forehead, an old scar from when he fell off his bike at age 8. The same way of smiling slightly to the side, as if holding a secret. Daniel felt his legs grow weak. It was James, his father. The man he hadn't seen in 15 years. The man he had left behind when he left home at 18, vowing never to return. The man he had erased from his memory, from his life, from his heart. James was there, sitting on that dirty bench, thin and aged, eating a hot dog that his daughter had bought for him. And Emily had no idea she was feeding her own grandfather. Daniel stood frozen, feeling the world spin around him. Emily was talking excitedly to James, gesturing with her small hands. James smiled and listened, chewing the snack slowly, asking questions, showing genuine interest in the conversation. For a moment, Daniel thought about leaving, grabbing Emily, getting in the car, and never coming back to that park. Pretending he hadn't seen anything, but his feet wouldn't obey. He stood there, paralyzed, watching his 5-year-old daughter happily chatting with the grandfather she had never met. James looked up for a second and met Daniel's gaze. For an instant, that seemed to last an eternity, father and son stared at each other across the sunlit park. There was recognition in James's eyes. Daniel was sure of it. But then his father looked away, as if he hadn't seen anything important. He went back to talking to Emily, who was still chattering about her favorite cartoons. Daniel felt something break inside his chest, a mix of shame, longing, and fear that he hadn't felt in 15 years. The man on the bench was his father, and now he didn't know what to do. The automatic gate opened slowly as Daniel parked the BMW in the garage. The 2-story house was quiet, its large windows reflecting the afternoon sun. Emily jumped out of the car and ran inside, still talking about the nice man she had met at the park. "Daddy, he said my drawings are pretty. And he likes dogs too." Daniel forced a smile and nodded, but his hands were trembling as he took the key out of the ignition. The encounter at the park had lasted only a few minutes, but it felt like a bomb had gone off inside his head. "That's great, honey. Go wash your hands and watch some TV." Emily disappeared up the stairs, leaving Daniel alone in the white marble kitchen. He leaned against the counter and took a deep breath, trying to calm down. But it was no use. The image of James's face wouldn't leave his mind. His father was old, very old, and thin, and living on the streets. Daniel opened the fridge and grabbed a bottle of water, drinking straight from it. His hands were still shaking. How had this happened? How had James ended up on the streets? And why was he in that park, on the very day Daniel took Emily there? He tried to focus on other things. He looked at the shopping list stuck to the fridge. He checked his emails on his phone. He turned on the dishwasher. Anything to keep from thinking, but it didn't work. The memories came back in waves, one after another, beyond his control. The small house where he grew up. Just 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a tiny kitchen. The wallpaper peeling from the walls, the shower that sometimes had no hot water, the old sofa where James sat every night to watch the news. Daniel remembered the smell of the house, a mix of cheap coffee and laundry detergent. His mother had died when he was 12, and since then it had just been him and James, father and son, trying to survive on his father's mechanic salary. James worked at a small garage downtown, 6 days a week, from 7 in the morning to 6 at night. He would come home with his hands dirty with grease, tired, but he always asked about Daniel's day at school. "How was it today, son?" Daniel used to answer without much interest. School was just school. He wanted to get out of there, out of that life, out of that poverty. James never complained about anything. He paid the bills on time, even when money was tight. He bought Daniel's school supplies, even if it meant eating beans and rice for a week. He never let him go without. But Daniel wanted more. He looked at his classmates who had brand-name clothes, expensive sneakers, new video games. He looked at the big houses in the wealthy neighborhood and dreamed of living in one. He looked at the imported cars in the school parking lot and promised himself that one day he would have one just like them. James didn't understand these dreams. For him, what was important was having a roof over their heads, food on the table, and good health. The rest was an unnecessary luxury. "Money doesn't buy happiness, son." Daniel hated when his father said that. Of course, money bought happiness. Money bought freedom. Money bought respect. Money bought a better life. The fight started when Daniel turned 16, small arguments that grew over time. "I want to go to college for business administration." "Son, we don't have money for that. How about you learn a trade? I can get you a spot at the garage." "I don't want to work in a garage. I want to be a businessman." "And where is the money for college going to come from?" "I'll get a scholarship. I'll study at night and work during the day." James would shake his head, worried. He wanted his son to stay close, to build a simple and secure life. He didn't understand all that ambition. Daniel got the scholarship. He spent 3 years working during the day and studying at night, saving every penny. James supported him as best he could. But Daniel felt his father didn't truly believe in his dreams. The final fight happened on a rainy night. Daniel had just graduated and had gotten a job at a consulting firm in another city. The salary was 3 times what James earned. "I'm moving out next week." "Where to?" "Chicago. I got a job at a big firm." James was quiet for a while, stirring his cup of coffee. "That's far, son." "It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, Dad. I can grow there, make the life I've always wanted." "And me?" The question caught Daniel by surprise. He had never thought about that. James had always seemed so independent, so capable of taking care of himself. "You'll be fine here. You have your job, your friends. You're my only family, Daniel." "Dad, don't be dramatic. I'll visit whenever I can." But they both knew that wouldn't happen. Daniel was leaving for a new life, and there was no room for James in it. The goodbye was quick and cold. James helped him carry the bags to the car. He gave his son a tight hug. He told him to be careful and to call whenever he could. Daniel promised he would call. He promised he would come back to visit. He promised he wouldn't forget, but he forgot. In the first few months, they still exchanged a few calls. James would ask about the job, about life in the big city. Daniel would answer quickly, always in a hurry, always busy. Over time, the calls became rarer. Daniel was building a career, meeting important people, making money. His old life seemed like a distant dream. When he met Sarah, Emily's mother, he didn't even tell her about James. He said his parents had died when he was young. It was easier that way, cleaner. Sarah died in a car accident when Emily was 2. Daniel was left alone with his daughter, but by then he had so much money he could hire nannies, maids, everything he needed. Emily grew up not knowing she had a grandfather. Daniel made up stories about grandparents who had died before she was born. The girl never questioned it. And now James was there, in that park, living as a homeless man. Daniel sat at the kitchen table and put his head in his hands. How had things gotten to this point? What had happened to James? Why was he on the streets? And why, after 15 years, Did Daniel feel a tightness in his chest when he thought of his father? He always thought he had made the right choice. He had built a successful life. He had money, a beautiful house, a thriving company. It was exactly what he had always wanted. But now, seeing James in that state, Daniel wondered if he hadn't lost something important along the way. Emily came running down the stairs, interrupting his thoughts. "Daddy, can I go back to the park tomorrow? I want to take more drawings to the man." Daniel looked at his daughter. Her light blue eyes were shining with enthusiasm. She had formed a connection with James in just a few minutes, a connection Daniel had lost 15 years ago. "We'll see, honey. We'll see." But Daniel knew he couldn't go back to that park. He couldn't face James again. He couldn't deal with the guilt, the shame, with all the memories he had tried to bury. He had built a new life, and in this life, there was no room for ghosts from the past. Daniel woke up on Tuesday with the feeling he had forgotten something important. He had breakfast alone in the silent kitchen while Emily slept upstairs. He tried to focus on work emails, but his mind kept wandering to the same place. The park, the bench, James. After dropping Emily off at school, Daniel drove aimlessly through the city. He passed by his office but didn't go in. He drove through neighborhoods he hadn't visited in years. He stopped at a cafe for another coffee he didn't want. It was noon when he realized where he was going. The park was almost empty at that time of day. Just a few people walking, an elderly couple feeding pigeons, a woman jogging with headphones. Daniel parked far away and walked slowly down the main path. James was there, sitting on the same bench as always, but this time he was holding a thick, brown-covered book. Small glasses were balanced on the tip of his nose, and his straight posture contrasted with his old, worn-out clothes. Daniel stopped about 50 feet away, watching. His father seemed engrossed in his reading, oblivious to the movement around him. Every so often he would turn a page, adjust his glasses, shift his position. There was a certain dignity in those simple gestures. After a few minutes of hesitation, Daniel approached. "Good morning." James looked up from his book and smiled. A polite smile, with no recognition. "Good morning. How are you?" "Well, thank you. Sorry to bother you. I saw you reading and got curious about the book." "No bother at all. It's always nice to talk to someone." James closed the book, keeping his finger between the pages to mark his spot. "The Grapes of Wrath" by John Steinbeck. "Have you read it?" Daniel vaguely remembered the book from his school days, but he remembered better James reading Steinbeck aloud on Sunday nights when he was a child, a long time ago. "Is it good?" "It's one of my favorites. Steinbeck had a unique way of telling stories. He left the reader thinking, questioning. "May I sit?" "Of course. Make yourself comfortable." Daniel sat on the other end of the bench, maintaining a respectful distance. James put the book in a cloth bag that was beside him. "Do you enjoy reading?" "I always have. Books are good companions. They don't judge, they don't abandon, they're always there when you need them." The sentence had a melancholic tone that made Daniel's chest tighten. "True. And you always come here to read?" "Almost every day. It's a quiet place. And it has a good energy, you know. A lot of good memories here." Daniel knew exactly what those memories were. Sunday afternoons at the park when he was a child, James pushing him on the swing, teaching him to ride a bike on the lawn, buying popcorn from the cart. Family memories. James was quiet for a moment, looking at the trees. "Yes, from when my son was little. We came here a lot." "How old is he now?" "He would be 33. If he's still—" James didn't finish the sentence, but Daniel understood. His father didn't even know if he was alive. "You don't have contact with him?" "No, not for a long time." "What happened?" James sighed slowly. "He grew up. He wanted to fly high, and he flew." "That's not necessarily a bad thing." "No, it's not. I'm proud he succeeded." "I always knew he was smart, ambitious, different from me." "Different how?" "I've always been a simple man. Honest work, a simple life, few needs. He wanted more, much more." Daniel remembered the fights, the arguments about the future, the frustration he felt with the limited life James offered. "And you didn't support his dreams?" "I tried, within my means. But it wasn't enough for him. And he was right, he needed more than I could give. It must have been hard to see him go. It was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life, but sometimes loving someone means letting them follow their own path, even if it's far away from you. Daniel was silent, processing the words. He had expected to find resentment, bitterness, maybe even anger, but James spoke with a serene acceptance that completely disarmed him. You don't feel angry with him. Angry? Why? For seeking a better life, for achieving his dreams. That would be selfish of me. But he abandoned you. He chose a different path, James corrected gently. Did it hurt? Of course it hurt. It still hurts. But it was his choice, and I respect that. How can you be so calm about it? James smiled, a sad but genuine smile. Because holding a grudge only hurts the one who holds it, and because a father's love is unconditional. No matter what happens, he's still my son. Daniel felt a lump in his throat. His father's generosity, after 15 years of abandonment, was almost unbearable. Would you like to see him again? Every single day, James admitted, his voice growing softer, but only if he wanted to. I would never force a meeting. Why not? Because true love is not imposed. If one day he wants to find me, he knows where to look. But how would he know where to find you? James gestured around him. I always return to the places he knows. This park, the downtown library, the square near our old house. It's a way of keeping the door open. Daniel felt his heart race. James maintained a routine based on the places of his childhood, hoping that one day his son would decide to look for him. How long have you been doing this? Since he left? 15 years. 15 years. James had spent 15 years waiting, holding on to hope, visiting the places of memory. And if he never shows up? Then at least I tried. At least he knows the door was always open. They sat in silence for a few minutes. Daniel watched his father discreetly, noticing details he had missed in their first encounter. James's hair was clean and combed. His beard was trimmed. His clothes were old but neat. He maintained his dignity even in adversity. How do you live now? Daniel asked. One day at a time. I have my books, a few friends, odd jobs that come up. It's not the life I planned, but it's the life I have. Isn't it hard to live like this? James understood the unasked question. Living on the street, it was very hard at first, but you adapt, and it has its advantages too. Advantages? Freedom. I don't owe anything to anyone. I don't have bills to pay, social commitments, pressures. It's a simple life, but an honest one. Daniel couldn't understand how James could find positive aspects in living on the streets, how he could maintain such serenity, such dignity. Aren't you scared? Don't you feel lost? I have, in the early years especially, but then I understood that you only get lost when you don't know who you are. I know who I am. And who are you? James thought for a moment. I am a man who raised a son with love, who worked honestly his whole life, who did the best he could with what he had. That's enough for me. Daniel felt his eyes burn. The simplicity of the answer was devastating. You don't regret anything. Some things, yes. I wish I had been a better father. I wish I had understood my son's dreams better. I wish I had known how to keep him close without limiting him. Maybe he regrets some things too. I hope not. I hope he is happy, that he found what he was looking for. And if he wanted to ask for forgiveness, for the lost time, James looked directly at Daniel, there would be nothing to forgive. A father doesn't hold a grudge against his son. Never. Daniel looked away, unable to hold his father's intense gaze. It must be hard to be a father. It's the hardest and most rewarding thing in the world. Do you have children? The question caught Daniel off guard. I have a daughter. How old? 5 years old. Ah, a wonderful age. Everything is a discovery. Everything is possible. Enjoy every moment. It's not always easy. Work, responsibilities. I understand, but don't let responsibilities steal the simple moments. Those are the moments that stay in your memory. Daniel thought of all the times he had ignored Emily to answer messages, to take calls, to work. How many moments had he lost? Time passed slowly. They talked about books, about the city, about small everyday things. James was an interesting conversationalist, cultured, with well-formed opinions on various subjects. Daniel discovered that his father frequented the public library, where he also helped out occasionally, that he knew the city better than any resident, that he had a network of friends among people who, like him, lived on the margins of society. You know a lot of people around here. When you live on the street, you learn that everyone has a story, and interesting stories most of the time. Isn't it dangerous? It can be, but it can also be dangerous to cross the street or drive in the rain. Life always has risks. But don't you miss having a home? Stability? Home isn't the place where you sleep. Home is where you feel welcomed, accepted. I feel at home here in this park, at the library, in places where people treat me with respect. Daniel was impressed by his father's simple wisdom. James had found a way of life that, despite the obvious difficulties, seemed to bring him peace. You're a strong person. I'm not strong. I just learned to adapt. And I learned that happiness doesn't come from having a lot, but from wanting little. The conversation was interrupted when some clouds began to darken the sky. The wind grew colder. Looks like it's going to rain, Daniel observed. Yes, it does. I'll have to find some shelter. James began to put his book in the bag, preparing to leave. Do you have a place to stay? I have a few places. I know the city well. Daniel wanted to offer help, but he didn't know how. He wanted to say that James could stay at his house, but the words wouldn't come out. James stood up, adjusting the bag on his shoulder. It was a pleasure talking with you. It's not often I find someone willing to listen. The pleasure was mine. Daniel also stood up, not knowing how to say goodbye. Maybe we'll see each other around here again. I hope so. Like I said, I come here almost every day. James extended his hand. Daniel shook it, feeling the rough, calloused skin, but the grip was firm and warm. Take good care of your daughter, James said before leaving. Time passes faster than we imagine. Daniel stood still, watching his father walk away towards the park exit. He wanted to run after him, to scream that he was his son, to hug him and ask for forgiveness. But he stood there, motionless, watching James disappear among the trees. In the following days, Daniel returned to the park 3 times. He always found James on the same bench, always reading, always willing to talk. They spoke about books, about life, about simple philosophies James had developed over the years. James never asked personal questions. He treated Daniel like a polite acquaintance, respectful but not intimate. It was as if he had established a safe distance, a way to protect himself from expectations. It was on the 5th visit that everything changed. The day was particularly overcast, with a cold wind that made the dry leaves dance on the ground. When Daniel arrived at the park, James wasn't reading. He was looking at something he held in his hands. "Good morning," Daniel said, approaching. "Ah, hello, please sit down." Daniel noticed that James seemed different today, more melancholic, more thoughtful. "Is everything all right?" Yes, I was just reminiscing about some things." It was then that Daniel saw what James was holding, an old wallet, its leather worn and stained. James opened it slowly, carefully, as if it was something very fragile. "Some things you can never throw away," James said, more to himself than to Daniel. He took out a small photo, yellowed by time and worn at the edges. He looked at it for a moment, a sad smile crossing his face. "My son," he said simply, showing the photo to Daniel. "I never saw him again, but I never stopped carrying him with me." Daniel felt the world stop. The photo was of him. At 17, wearing the borrowed suit for his high school graduation, he remembered the day the photo was taken perfectly. James had insisted on capturing the moment, proud of his graduating son. "He looks like you when you were young," Daniel managed to say, his voice sounding strange. "Everyone says that," James replied, without taking his eyes off the photo. "But it's not just the appearance, it was his personality too, smart, determined, always questioning everything." Daniel couldn't speak. He saw himself in the photo, young and full of dreams. and he saw James keeping that image for 15 years. He was a good boy, James continued. Stubborn at times, but good. He wanted to change the world. And what happened to him? He grew up, became a man, followed his dreams as he was meant to. James put the photo back in the wallet with the same care he had taken it out with. I hope he became a good person and that he remembers where he came from. The sentence hit Daniel like a lightning bolt. James still hoped he would remember the simple lessons, the values his father had tried to teach. Daniel was speechless, unable to respond. The guilt was suffocating him. James put the wallet in his pocket and looked up at the increasingly cloudy sky. It's going to rain hard. I'd better go find shelter. Of course, Daniel managed to whisper. James stood up, picked up his bag, and said goodbye with a wave. Daniel remained seated, watching his father walk away once more. When James disappeared from view, Daniel stood up abruptly and walked quickly towards his car. His hands were shaking as he put the key in the ignition. The image of the photo wouldn't leave his mind. James carrying his memory for 15 years, waiting, keeping hope alive. And he had been sitting there next to his father all these days, lying, pretending to be a stranger. The weight of his omission was becoming unbearable. Daddy, can we go to the park today? Emily was in the kitchen, eating colorful cereal while swinging her legs in her high chair. Her blonde hair was messy from sleep, and she was wearing her unicorn print pajamas. Daniel almost choked on his coffee. Why, wouldn't you rather go to the mall or the movies? I want to see the hot dog man. What man, honey? The one I gave food to on Saturday. You remember? Daniel remembered all too well. He had spent the whole week trying to forget, but the image of James on the bench kept coming back to his mind. Emily, maybe he's not there anymore. But maybe he is, she insisted, her blue eyes shining. He was very nice, and he looked sad. I want to take drawings to him. Drawings? I made a bunch at school this week. The teacher said they were beautiful. Emily jumped down from her chair and ran to get her school backpack. She returned with a folder full of colorful papers. Look, Daddy, this one is a house with a garden. This one is a dog. And this one is a happy family. Daniel looked at the drawings, simple lines, vibrant colors, the innocence of a 5-year-old expressed in every crooked line. They're beautiful, sweetie, but I don't know if... Please, Daddy, just for a little bit. I want to show him. Emily made that face Daniel could never resist. Big eyes, a slightly pouting lower lip, her hands clasped together in a plea. Daniel sighed. Part of him wanted to avoid the park forever, but another part, a part that was growing every day, wanted to see James again. All right, but just for a little while, okay? Okay, Emily shouted, jumping for joy. An hour later, they were walking through the park entrance. Emily clutched the folder of drawings to her chest, anxious. Daniel tried to appear calm, but his heart was racing. There! Emily pointed to the bench. He's there! James was in his usual spot, reading a book. When he saw Emily running towards him, he closed the book and smiled. Look who's back. The hot dog girl. Hi, I brought something for you. Emily stopped in front of James, a little shy now that she was face to face with him. Daniel approached slowly, pretending it was the first time he had seen the man. Good morning, Daniel said. Good morning, you must be the father of this young artist. I am... Daniel? James. A pleasure to meet you. They shook hands. Daniel tried not to show any emotion as he heard his father say his own name. Daddy, can I show him the drawings? Of course, honey. Emily opened the folder and took out the first drawing. It was a colorful house with flowers in the garden and a big yellow sun in the sky. I made this for you. It's a pretty house, what with a garden. James took the drawing carefully, as if it was something very valuable. It's beautiful, Emily. Really beautiful. Look at what beautiful colors you used. Do you like houses? I like them very much, and this house looks like a very happy place to live. Emily smiled, excited by the compliment. She took another drawing from the folder. This is a dog. Do you like dogs? I love them. I had one when I was younger. His name was Rex. What color was he? Brown and white, a bit like the one in your drawing. Daniel remembered Rex. a mutt that James had adopted when Daniel was a child. The dog lived in the small yard of their house, always wagging his tail when he saw James come home from work. "Can I sit here?" Emily asked, pointing to the bench. "Of course, come on up." James made room, and Emily sat next to him. Daniel stood, watching the interaction between grandfather and granddaughter. "How old are you, Emily?" "5. And you?" James laughed. "A lot more than 5. I'm an old man." "You're not old, you're just more experienced." The answer made James laugh even more. "Experienced. I like that word. Where did you learn that?" "At school, the teacher said older people are experienced, not old." "Your teacher is very wise." Emily showed more drawings. One of a family at the beach, another of a tree full of apples, another of a girl flying on a cloud. James commented on each one with genuine interest, asking questions about the colors, the characters, the stories behind each drawing. Daniel watched, impressed. Emily, who was sometimes shy with strangers, was completely at ease with James. She talked non-stop, laughed at his jokes, asked questions about everything. "Do you live near here?" Emily asked. James hesitated for a moment, looking at Daniel. "I live in many places. I'm a bit like a traveler." "That's so cool. You must know many places." "I do. And every place has its own stories." "Tell me a story." "Emily, don't bother the gentleman," Daniel intervened. "It's no bother at all," James said. "I love telling stories." He thought for a moment. "Once upon a time, there was a little bird who wanted to fly very high." James told a story about a brave little bird who left home to explore the world. Emily listened with full attention, her eyes shining with interest. Daniel remembered that kind of story. James used to make up tales at bedtime, always with a gentle lesson at the end, always about courage, kindness, family. "And did the little bird come home?" Emily asked when the story was over. "Ah, that's the best part. He discovered that he could fly high and still come back to the nest whenever he wanted. Home would always be there waiting for him." "How beautiful." "Daddy, did you hear the story?" "I did. It was very beautiful." Daniel understood the message between the lines. James was talking about forgiveness, about coming home, about a family that always waits. Emily and James talked for another 20 minutes. She showed him all the drawings, told him about school, about her friends, about the TV shows she liked to watch. James listened to everything with infinite patience, asking questions at the right moment, laughing at the funny parts. "You're very nice," Emily said suddenly. "You're like my daddy." James looked at Daniel, then back at Emily. "I'm like him." "A little bit, in the way you smile, and in your eyes." Daniel felt his heart race. Emily had noticed the resemblance without knowing what it meant. "Your daddy must be a very good man then," James said. "He is. He works a lot, but he's the best daddy in the world." James smiled, a proud smile that Daniel recognized. It was the same smile his father had when he talked about him to other people, when Daniel was a child. "I'm sure he is." Time passed quickly. Emily was completely charmed by James, and he seemed equally charmed by her. There was a natural connection between them, something light and spontaneous that surprised Daniel. It was as if Emily had found an old friend, and James, a new purpose. "Emily, I think it's time to go," Daniel said eventually. "Oh, Daddy, just a little longer?" "Your father is right," James said gently. "Girls need their lunch and rest. Can I come back to see you again?" James looked at Daniel, waiting for the answer. "Maybe," Daniel said, "if Mr. James doesn't mind." "I would never mind." This was one of the best moments of my week. Emily got off the bench and hugged James, a quick, affectionate hug, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Thank you for the compliments on my drawings. Thank you for sharing them with me. They are beautiful." Emily returned to her father's side. Daniel extended his hand to James. "It was a pleasure meeting you." "The pleasure was all mine. Emily is a special girl." "She is. Take good care of her. Children grow up so fast." "I will." They said their goodbyes and started walking back to the car. Emily skipped alongside Daniel, clearly happy with the encounter. "Daddy, he's so nice." And he said my drawings are beautiful. They are beautiful, honey. And he tells really good stories. Can I bring more drawings next time? We'll see. Daddy, what is it? He looks like you. Daniel stopped walking for a second. He does. A little bit, in the way he talks, the way he smiles. And he's kind, just like you. Daniel didn't know what to say. Emily had noticed the family resemblance without understanding what it meant. She had built a bridge between two worlds without knowing she was reuniting a family. Come on, honey, let's go get some lunch. As they drove home, Daniel watched Emily in the rearview mirror. She was drawing in the back seat, probably making more pictures for James. For a few minutes on that bench, a family had been reunited. Grandfather, father, and granddaughter, brought together by the innocence of a child who saw kindness where adults saw complications. Emily had done in one morning what Daniel hadn't managed in 15 years. She had created a real connection with James, and she didn't even know the miracle she had just performed. Daddy, can we visit James today? Emily was jumping around the kitchen as Daniel prepared breakfast. It had become a routine. Twice a week, they would go to the park to meet James. Emily always brought new drawings, and James always had a story to tell. Of course, honey. After lunch, Daniel had gotten used to these visits. At first, they were strange, tense. He pretended to be just a father taking his daughter to see a friend. But slowly, something had changed. The conversations became more natural, the silences less heavy. They arrived at the park at 3 in the afternoon. The sun was strong, and it was more crowded than usual. Families with children, elderly people walking, chess players occupying the tables. Emily ran ahead, eager to show off her new drawing. It was a rainbow with fluffy clouds and a castle at the end. Where is he, Daddy? Daniel looked at the bench. It was empty. He must be walking around. Let's wait a bit. They sat on the bench and waited. Emily played with the dry leaves on the ground. Daniel checked messages on his phone. 15 minutes. Half an hour. An hour. James didn't show up. Do you think he doesn't come here anymore? Emily asked, worried. I don't know, honey. Maybe he went somewhere else today. But Daniel was uneasy. James never missed a day. Even when it rained, he would show up at the park if only to say hi to Emily. Should we look for him? Emily suggested. Emily, we don't know where... There! She suddenly shouted, pointing to the side. Daniel looked in the direction she was pointing. Near a large tree, about 50 yards from the bench, a figure was lying on the ground. Daddy, it's him! Emily took off running before Daniel could stop her. He ran after her, his heart pounding. It was James. He was lying on his side, unconscious, his skin pale and sweaty. The book he always carried was on the ground beside him, its pages fluttering in the wind. Daddy, we have to help. Daniel knelt beside James and checked his pulse. It was weak, but still there. His breathing was shallow and irregular. James, can you hear me? No response. Daniel grabbed his phone with trembling hands and dialed 911. Medical emergency, Riverside Park, near the playground. Man, approximately 60 years old, unconscious, weak pulse. Emily was at his side, holding James's hand. Is he going to be okay, Daddy? He will, honey. The ambulance is coming. But Daniel wasn't sure of anything. James looked very frail, very pale, as if life was slowly slipping away from him. The ambulance arrived in 8 minutes. The paramedics worked quickly, checking vital signs, putting an oxygen mask on him, preparing James for transport. Are you family? One of the paramedics asked. Daniel hesitated. We're friends. We found him like this. We're taking him to General Hospital. You can follow us if you want. Daniel picked Emily up and ran to the car. Throughout the drive, she asked questions he couldn't answer. Why did he faint, Daddy? I don't know, honey. Was he sick? Maybe. Is he going to get better? I hope so. At the hospital, they waited in the emergency room. Emily sat next to Daniel, swinging her legs in the high chair, hugging the drawing she had made for James. 2 hours later, a doctor approached. Did you come with Mr. James Mitchell? Yes. How is he? Stable, but critical. He suffered a severe kidney failure episode. His kidneys are functioning at less than 15% of their normal capacity. Daniel felt the floor drop from under his feet. Is that serious? Very serious. He'll need immediate dialysis and specialized care. We're transferring him to the nephrology unit. Is he going to be okay? It's too early to say, but he's strong. And having people who care about him helps a lot with recovery. Daniel nodded, unable to speak. The possibility of losing James, now that he had just started to reconnect with him, was terrifying. Can I see him? Emily asked the doctor. You're too little for the ICU, but when he's transferred to a room, yes. Emily was quiet, processing the information. Is he going to be here for a long time? A few weeks, at least. James spent 3 days in the ICU. Daniel called every hour for updates. Emily made new drawings every day, waiting to be able to give them to him. When can I see James? She asked every morning. Soon, honey, soon. On the 4th day, James was transferred to a regular room. Daniel and Emily went to visit him at the first opportunity. James was awake, but very weak. There were tubes and wires connected to his body. Machines beeped strangely next to the bed. Hi, he said in a hoarse voice when he saw them enter. James! Emily ran to the bed. I missed you. James smiled. The first smile since the incident. I missed you too, little one. I brought new drawings. Emily showed a stack of colorful papers. She had made one for each day James was in the hospital. This is you in the hospital getting better. This is me visiting you, and this is us at the park again. James looked at each drawing carefully, his eyes shining. These are the most beautiful ones you've ever made. I made them with lots of love, so you can get better soon. James looked at Daniel, who was standing by the door. Thank you for coming. Of course. Daniel approached the bed, still not quite sure what to say. How are you feeling? Better now that you're here. Emily told him about school, about her friends, about everything that had happened in the last few days. James listened attentively, asking questions, laughing at the funny stories. Daniel watched, impressed, even sick, hooked up to machines. James maintained a genuine interest in Emily. He was the same attentive father he remembered from his childhood. When it was time to leave, Emily gave James a kiss on the forehead. Will you come back tomorrow? He asked. I will, and I'll bring more drawings. I'll be waiting. Over the following weeks, Emily and Daniel visited James every day. Emily always arrived talking non-stop, showing new drawings, telling stories from school. James listened to everything, answered all her questions, and made up new stories. Daniel noticed that James began to recover more quickly after Emily started visiting. He ate better, slept better, and cooperated more with the treatments. The girl is good for him, a nurse commented. Ever since she started coming, he's been more cheerful. Daniel also began to stay longer during the visits. At first, he just accompanied Emily, stood by the door, and said little. But slowly, he started getting closer. They talked about simple things. The weather, the news, the books James was reading. Nothing deep, nothing that touched on the past. But it was a start. James never asked about Daniel's life. He never questioned why he was visiting a stranger in the hospital. He treated him with the same polite cordiality as always. But Daniel noticed small signs, the way James smiled when he arrived, how he waited for his opinions on small things, how his eyes followed him as he moved around the room. One afternoon, Emily was drawing in the chair next to the bed. James and Daniel were talking about a book the nurse had lent him. Do you like to read? James asked. I do. I don't have much time lately, but I do. What kind of books? Biographies, mostly. Stories of people who overcame challenges. James nodded. They're inspiring. They show that it's always possible to start over. The sentence hung in the air between them. Daniel felt that James was talking about more than just books. Sometimes it's hard to start over, Daniel said slowly. It is, but not impossible. Especially when we have reasons to try. James looked at Emily, who was focused on coloring a drawing of a family. She is your reason, James said simply. She is. She's a very good reason. Daniel felt something stir in his chest, a connection being made, slowly, carefully. Do you have reasons to start over? James smiled. Lately, I've had a few. They didn't talk more about it that day, but something had changed. A door had opened, just a crack, but enough to let the light in. In the following weeks, the conversations grew a little longer, the silences more comfortable. Daniel started arriving earlier, leaving later. Emily was the catalyst for everything. Her presence transformed the hospital room into a place of joy. She made James laugh, made Daniel relax, and created an environment where healing could happen. Not just the healing of James's body, but the healing of something much deeper, something that had been broken 15 years ago and was now, slowly, being repaired. The bond between father and son was being stitched back together, stitch by stitch, day by day. And Emily, without knowing it, was the thread that joined the pieces. It was almost 9 at night when Daniel returned to the hospital. Emily was asleep at home with the nanny, and he had used the excuse that he wanted to check if James needed anything. The truth was he couldn't stay away anymore. In the last 3 weeks, since James had been admitted, something had changed inside Daniel. The fear of losing his father, which he didn't even know still existed, had awakened feelings he thought he had buried forever. The hospital corridor was quiet, just the soft hum of machines and the distant echo of nurses' footsteps. Daniel knocked lightly on the room door. "Come in," came James's voice. Daniel pushed the door open. James was awake, looking out the window. The light from the bedside lamp cast soft shadows on his face. "Hi. How are you feeling?" "Better. I thought you weren't coming back today. I wanted to make sure you were okay." James turned to look at him, a gentle smile on his face. "Daniel." Something in the way James said his name made Daniel pause. There was a familiarity, a tenderness that wasn't there before. "What is it?" "Sit here." Daniel approached slowly and sat in the chair next to the bed. James watched him attentively, as if memorizing every detail of his face. "Can I ask you a question?" "Of course." James took a deep breath, gathering his courage. "Why do you come here every day? Why do you care so much about a stranger?" Daniel felt his heart race. The question he had feared, but knew would come one day. Emily likes you, and you seem to need company." "Many people need company. You don't visit all of them." There was something in James's voice, a quiet certainty that made Daniel nervous. "I don't understand what you're getting at." James was quiet for a long moment, just watching Daniel. Then, slowly, he reached out and touched his arm. "I knew it was you from the first day." The words fell like a lightning bolt in the quiet room. Daniel felt the world stop. "What are you talking about?" "At the park, when you first approached me, pretending to be interested in my book, I knew exactly who you were." Daniel tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. His throat was tight. "Daniel," James said softly. "My son." The name spoken with such tenderness shattered all of Daniel's defenses. He felt his eyes well up with tears. How did you know?" "A father always recognizes his son. You may have changed, you may have grown, but your eyes are the same. The way you furrow your brow when you're thinking, the way you run your hand through your hair when you're nervous." The tears Daniel had held back for weeks began to fall. "Why didn't you say anything?" James squeezed his hand affectionately. "Because I needed to see if you had truly come back." "What do you mean?" "If you were just there by chance, if you were going to leave again at the first opportunity, or if you really wanted to stay." Daniel cried harder, unable to control his emotions. "And Emily, did you know she was my granddaughter?" "Of course I knew. She has your eyes from when you were a child, and she has my nose, just like you did." "God, Dad." The word came out before Daniel could stop it. 15 years without saying that word, and now it came out naturally. "Yes, son, it's me," Daniel broke down. 15 years of guilt, of longing, of regret pouring out all at once. "Forgive me," he sobbed. "Forgive me for everything." "Daniel." "I abandoned you," Daniel cried between tears. "I left you alone. I never called, never checked on you. I let you live on the streets while I had everything." "Son, listen. No, let me speak." Daniel was desperate. "I was a horrible son, a monster. You raised me alone after Mom died, worked hard to give me everything, and I just left and erased you from my life." James tried to sit up in bed, ignoring the tubes. "Daniel, stop it. I told Emily you were dead. I lied to her about having a grandfather. I robbed her of the chance to know you for 5 years. Daniel," James's firm voice made him stop. Father and son looked at each other through their tears. "You've punished yourself enough. You've carried this guilt for too long. How can you not be angry with me? Because I understand why you left. You understand." James adjusted himself in bed, took both of Daniel's hands, and held them tightly. "You were young. You had big dreams, and I was just a simple mechanic in a small town. I couldn't offer the life you wanted. That doesn't justify—" "Yes, it does. You had the right to seek your happiness. But I never looked for you. Never!" James smiled through his own tears. "But you came back, and you brought my granddaughter to me. Only by chance. If it weren't for the meeting at the park, it wasn't chance," James interrupted. "It was fate. I sat in that park every day waiting for you to show up, and you showed up." Daniel cried even harder. "You waited for 15 years, every single day, because I knew that one day you would come home. How did you know? Because you are my son. And deep down, every child misses home." Daniel couldn't speak anymore. He sobbed like a child. "Forgive me, Dad. Please, forgive me for being so selfish, for forgetting you, for leaving you alone all these years." James let go of Daniel's hands and held his face. "There is nothing to forgive, my son. Nothing. But you achieved your dreams. You became the man I always knew you could be. You built a beautiful life, have a wonderful daughter. I'm proud of you. Proud. After everything I did, especially after everything you did, because it means I raised a strong, independent man capable of getting what he wants." Daniel shook his head, unable to accept so much forgiveness. "I don't deserve it. Every child deserves their father's love, unconditionally, without judgment." "I love you, Dad," Daniel said through his sobs. "I always have, even when I pretended I didn't. And I love you, son. I never stopped loving you, not for a second." Daniel got up from the chair and leaned over the bed, hugging James tightly. Father and son embraced for the first time in 15 years. "I missed you every day," Daniel confessed. "Every day I thought about calling, about coming back. But I was ashamed. Afraid you wouldn't want me anymore. Daniel, look at me." Daniel pulled back a little to meet his father's eyes. "You are my son forever. No matter what happens, no matter how much time passes, there will always be a place for you in my life. Even after everything, especially after everything, because now I know you chose to come back. Not out of obligation, but out of love." They hugged again, crying together, letting 15 years of hurt and distance dissolve in that moment. "And now?" Daniel asked. "What do we do now?" "Now we are a family again. You, me, and my wonderful granddaughter. Emily is going to be ecstatic when she finds out she has a grandfather, and I'm going to be ecstatic being her grandfather." Daniel laughed through his tears. "She's going to ask you a million questions. She's very curious. I'm prepared. I have 15 years of stories to tell. Stories about me. About you, about us, about our family. Stories she deserves to know." Daniel nodded, still holding his father's hands. "I'm going to take care of you now. I'm never going to leave you alone again. And I'm going to take care of my granddaughter. I'm going to teach her everything I taught you, how to love unconditionally, among other things." The silence that followed was not empty like that of the past 15 years. It was a silence full of forgiveness, of acceptance, of rediscovered love. "Dad, yes, thank you for never giving up on me. Thank you for coming home, son." Father and son held each other late into the night, making up for 15 years of lost hugs. And for the first time in a long time, they both knew they were exactly where they were supposed to be, at home, in their family, in the love that had never really ended. "Daddy, when is James getting out of the hospital?" Emily had been asking this question every day for a week. Daniel had told her that James was getting better, but he hadn't yet explained the plans that were forming in his mind. "Soon, honey. Very soon. And is he going back to that place where he lived? Daniel stopped stirring his coffee and looked at Emily. The girl was sitting at the table, coloring a new drawing for James. Her blonde hair fell over the paper as she carefully worked on the details. Actually, Emily, I want to talk to you about that. About what? About James. About where he's going to live when he gets out of the hospital. Emily put down her colored pencil and gave her father her full attention. He doesn't have a house, right? He doesn't. That's sad. It is, but maybe we can help. How? Daniel sat down next to his daughter. He had rehearsed this conversation dozens of times, but now that the moment had arrived, he didn't know where to begin. How about James comes to live with us? Emily's eyes widened. Here, in our house? Here. He would stay in the guest room. What do you think? Emily jumped out of her chair, excited. That would be awesome. Then I can show him all my drawings, and my toys, and my collection of pretty rocks. Daniel laughed. His daughter's excitement was contagious. So you'd like him to live here? I'd love it. When is he coming? This afternoon. We're going to pick him up from the hospital. Emily shouted with joy and ran around the house, probably planning everything she was going to show James. Daniel stayed in the kitchen, thinking about what was about to happen. In a few hours, James would be there, in his house. 15 years after leaving that simple home, Daniel was going to welcome his father into the home he had built. At 2 in the afternoon, they were at the hospital. James was dressed in clothes Daniel had brought, simple cotton pants, a light blue shirt, black shoes. He was thinner than before, but the color had returned to his face. Ready to go home? Daniel asked. Home, James repeated, savoring the word. It's been a long time since I've said that word. Emily held James's hand as they walked down the hospital corridor. She chattered non-stop about all the plans she had for when they got home. First, I'll show you my room. Then the kitchen, where we eat cookies. Then the garden, where some birds come to drink water. I'm excited to see everything, James said, squeezing her small hand. During the car ride, Emily didn't stop talking. She explained about every street, every store, every traffic light. James listened to everything with attention, asking questions, showing genuine interest. Daniel watched in the rearview mirror. He saw his father and daughter interacting so naturally, as if they had known each other their whole lives. When they arrived home, Emily practically dragged James through the door. Come on, come see. Daniel's house was spacious and modern. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a large living room with a fireplace, a spacious kitchen. Very different from the simple house where Daniel had grown up. James looked around, impressed. It's beautiful, Daniel. Very beautiful. Thanks. Emily pulled James by the hand. Come on, I want to show you something. They went up the stairs, Emily leading James to her room. Daniel followed them, watching. Emily's room was full of color. Light pink walls, a bed with a white canopy, shelves full of books and toys, a small table where she drew, covered in colored pencils and paper. This is my room, Emily announced proudly. It's lovely, Emily, very cozy. And look, she ran to the table and picked up a stack of drawings. These are all the drawings I made for you, but I couldn't give them to you because you were in the hospital. James sat on the edge of the bed, and Emily came closer, showing him each drawing. There were at least 20. Houses, animals, families, rainbows, flowers. This is you reading on the park bench. This is me and you talking. This is a happy family. James looked at each drawing carefully, commenting on the colors, on the details. Emily beamed with happiness. And this here is my drawer of favorite clothes. Emily opened a drawer in the dresser and started pulling out clothes. This blue dress is my favorite for school. This skirt is for when I go to the park. And these pajamas are for sleeping. They are all very pretty. And you know what? Emily lowered her voice as if to tell a secret. I sleep with a light on. You do? Yeah, I'm a little scared of the dark. So Daddy leaves the hall light on and leaves the door a little bit open. James looked at Daniel, who confirmed with a nod. There's nothing wrong with sleeping with a light on, James said. Your dad used to do it too when he was little. He did, until he was 7, if I remember correctly. Emily looked at Daniel, surprised. Is that true, Daddy? It's true, Daniel admitted, laughing. That's so cool. We have things in common. Daniel felt a tightness in his chest. Emily was discovering similarities with the family she didn't know she had. They spent another hour in Emily's room. She showed him every toy, every book, every detail. James showed interest in everything, asking questions, telling related stories. When they went down to the living room, Daniel knew the time had come for the most important conversation. Emily, come here. I want to tell you something important. Emily approached, a little tense. Whenever Daniel used that tone, it was to say something serious. What is it, Daddy? Daniel knelt in front of his daughter, getting to her eye level. James stood beside them, waiting. Remember when you asked me if you had grandparents? I remember. You said they had died. Yes, I said that. But it wasn't true. Emily frowned, confused. What do you mean? Daniel took a deep breath. This was it. Emily, James is your grandfather. For a moment, Emily was completely still, processing the information. Then her eyes widened. My grandfather. Your grandfather, my father. Emily looked at James, then at Daniel, then at James again. He's your daddy. He is. And that means he's my grandfather. Exactly. Emily was quiet for a few seconds. Daniel held his breath, waiting for her reaction. Then, suddenly, a huge smile spread across Emily's face. Is it true? Is it really true? It's true. Emily looked at James, her eyes shining. Are you my real grandfather? I am, James said, his voice thick with emotion. I am your real grandfather. Emily ran to James and hugged him tightly. James picked her up, his eyes full of tears. I'm so glad I found you at the park and gave you a snack, Emily said, talking fast in her excitement. Otherwise, I would have never met you. Emily's words hit James like a punch to the chest. He began to cry, holding his granddaughter tightly. I'm so glad too, my little granddaughter. So very glad. Daniel also started to cry, seeing his father and daughter together, seeing Emily's pure joy, seeing James's emotion. The family was reunited for the first time. Why didn't you tell me before that he was my grandpa? Emily asked, still in James's arms. Because it's complicated, honey. Sometimes adults do the wrong things, and Daddy did a wrong thing. What thing? I pushed my dad away, and that was wrong. Emily looked at James. Did you guys fight? Something like that, James answered. But everything is okay now, and you're going to live here forever. If you'll have me, of course we'll have you, Emily shouted. Right, Daddy? Of course we will. Emily got down from James's lap and stood between the two men. Now I have a daddy and a grandpa, she announced proudly. You do, Daniel said, still emotional. And what do I call you? Emily asked James. Whatever you want to call me. Can I call you Grandpa? You can. Grandpa James. James laughed and cried at the same time. Grandpa James. I like that. That night, the household routine changed completely. Emily insisted that James have dinner with them at the kitchen table. She told him about every dish she was eating, every spice, and how Daniel cooked. After dinner, Emily led James to the living room sofa. Grandpa, do you want to see my old drawings? I'd love to. Emily ran to her room and came back with several folders. Drawings she had made since she was little, carefully saved by Daniel. I made this one when I was 3. This one when I was 4. And these are more recent. James looked at each drawing as if it were a work of art. He commented on the progress, the colors, the creativity. You've always been very talented, he said. Daddy saves all of them. He says they're special. They are very special. Emily then took James to see her collection of colorful rocks she had gathered at the park. Then she showed him her favorite books, then her toys. James listened to every detail with full attention. He asked questions about everything, showed genuine interest in each of Emily's little treasures. Daniel watched from a distance, leaning against the living room wall. He saw his father smiling, truly happy for the first time in years. He saw his daughter radiant, finally meeting the grandfather she had always wanted. It was a scene he had missed 15 years ago, but now it was happening right in front of him. "Grandpa, do you want me to read a story to you?" "I'd love that." Emily picked up a book of children's tales and snuggled up on the sofa next to James. She began to read aloud, the way Daniel had taught her. James listened attentively, sometimes asking questions about the story, sometimes praising Emily's reading. Daniel sat in a nearby armchair, watching the scene. Father and daughter sharing a simple but precious moment. The same scene he had lived with James as a child. It was there, in that moment, that Daniel understood something fundamental. Lost time doesn't come back. The 15 years that he and James spent apart could never be recovered, but love can come back. The love between a father and son, the love between a grandfather and granddaughter, the love of a family. It wasn't the same love as before. It was a new, mature love, aware of the losses and scars, but it was true love. "Daddy, come here," Emily called. "I want you and Grandpa to listen to the story together." Daniel came over and sat on the sofa. Emily was between him and James, reading to the two most important men in her life. The Carter family was, at last, reunited, and this time, nothing would ever separate them again. When Emily finished reading, she yawned. "I think it's bedtime," Daniel said. "Can I say goodnight to Grandpa?" "Of course." Emily hugged James and gave him a kiss on the cheek. "Good night, Grandpa. Thank you for being my grandpa." "Good night, my little granddaughter. Thank you for accepting me into your family." "You were always part of our family. We just didn't know it." James smiled, his eyes misty. "That's true. I always was." Daniel took Emily to her room, helped her change her clothes and brush her teeth. When she was in bed, he asked the question he asked every night. "Light on or off?" "On, please. And Daddy?" "What is it?" "I'm really happy that Grandpa James lives here now." "Me too, honey." "Our family got bigger." "It did. And happier too." Daniel went downstairs and found James still in the living room, looking at the family photos that decorated the shelves. "That's a lot of pictures of Emily," James observed. "I've documented everything since she was born. She's beautiful, smart, affectionate. She is. She's special." James looked at Daniel. "You're a wonderful father. I learned from the best." They hugged once more, but this time it was different. It wasn't the emotionally charged hug from the hospital. It was a family hug, a routine hug, from people who know they will see each other the next day. "Welcome to the family, Dad. Thank you for bringing me back, son." James's first night in the house was peaceful, but Daniel could barely sleep, not from anxiety or worry, but from a quiet happiness that filled every corner of his chest. His family was complete. Finally. Night had already fallen when Daniel found James on the back porch. His father was sitting in a wicker chair, looking at the starry sky, a cup of tea forgotten on the table beside him. 3 weeks had passed since he had moved in, and slowly the house was gaining new rhythms, new routines. Daniel approached slowly, carrying 2 steaming mugs. "Coffee," he offered, holding one out. James smiled and accepted. "Thank you. Beautiful night, isn't it?" "It is." Daniel sat in the chair next to him, and for a few minutes they both sat in silence, just enjoying the quiet of the garden and the brightness of the stars. It was a different silence from those of the past. There was no more weight, no more guilt. "Is Emily asleep?" James asked, breaking the silence. "Like a rock. After 3 stories and 5 questions about what the world was like when you were a kid." James chuckled softly. "She's curious." "She is, just like her grandfather." James's smile widened at the word grandfather. It was still new to him, still sounded like an unexpected gift. "You know, son," he said after a sip of coffee, "there's something I never told you." Daniel looked at his father, curious. "What's that?" James took a deep breath, organizing his thoughts. "In the first few months after you left, I would sit on the porch of our old house every night. I'd look at the street and imagine your car pulling up. I'd imagine you getting out, with that old backpack on your shoulder, saying you would come back." Daniel felt a tightness in his chest. "Dad." "No, let me finish." James held up a hand. "I'm not saying this to make you feel guilty. I just want you to understand something important. He placed the mug on the table and turned completely towards Daniel. I thought I would die alone on the streets. I really did. In the last few years, when my health started to decline, I thought every day, well, I guess this is it. I'd sit on that park bench and accept that one day I just wouldn't wake up. I'm sorry for making you believe that, Daniel said, his voice thick with emotion, for letting it get to that point. James shook his head slowly. There's nothing to forgive, Daniel, but I want you to know something. You came back, son. You gave me more than I ever thought I deserved after so many years. You deserved everything, Dad. You always did. James reached out and touched Daniel's arm. Do you know what I learned living on the streets all those years? What? That people don't need much to be happy. They need food, shelter, some clothes, but mostly they need connection, belonging, to know that they matter to someone in this world. He paused, looking up at the stars again. During those years, I met people who had lost everything. Homes, jobs, families. Some drank to forget. Others closed themselves off. But the ones who survived, the ones who maintained some dignity even in the worst circumstances, were the ones who could still care about someone other than themselves. Daniel listened in silence, absorbing every word. And I had you. Even at a distance, even without seeing you. I had the memory of my son. I was certain that, somewhere, you were alive, building your life, and that was enough to keep me going. Even after I left like that. Even so, because a father's love is unconditional, Daniel. It has no end, no expiration date. There isn't a moment when we say, well, now I don't love you anymore. Daniel couldn't hold back the tears that formed in the corners of his eyes. I think I only understood that when Emily was born, he confessed, when I looked at her for the first time and felt that I would do anything for that little creature. That no matter what happened, I would always love her. Exactly, James smiled, his eyes also moist. And it was by looking at her that you remembered me, wasn't it? Daniel nodded, surprised by his father's perception. I remembered when you used to take me to the park on Sundays, when you taught me to fix things in the garage, the stories you told before bed, how you worked so hard so I could have everything I needed. Good memories. The best. Memories I tried to bury, but could never completely erase. They looked at each other without bitterness. The silence was now comfort, not distance. I want to show you something, Daniel said, standing up. Wait here. He went inside the house and came back minutes later with a small box in his hands. He sat down again and opened it carefully. I found this when I moved here. I had kept it without realizing. Inside the box was an old wristwatch. The face was scratched, the leather strap worn by time. James recognized it immediately. My old watch, he whispered. I thought I'd thrown it away years ago. It was Grandpa's, wasn't it, your father's? It was. The only gift he gave me before he died. Daniel picked up the watch carefully. I remember seeing you wear this every day, even when it didn't work right anymore. Your grandfather used to say that a good watch is like a good life. No matter how many times it stops, it can always be fixed if you have patience. Daniel smiled and handed the watch to his father. It's yours. It always was. James held the watch as if it were a treasure. His trembling fingers caressed the scratched glass, the worn strap. Thank you, son. Thank you for keeping this. I didn't know why I kept it, but now I do. Why? Because deep down I always knew I would come back to you one day, that I would return this in person. James put the watch on his wrist. It no longer worked, the hands frozen at 3:27. But that didn't matter. Time had stopped for them for 15 years, and now it was running again. You know what else I missed? James asked. What? Hearing about your day, knowing what you were doing, what you were planning, your dreams, your achievements, even your failures. Daniel laughed softly. You used to hate it when I talked about business. You always said I was obsessed with money. I didn't hate it. No, I just didn't understand it. It was a different world from mine. But I was proud to see your intelligence, your determination. Really? Of course. Do you think any father wouldn't be proud to see his son succeed in life? I was just afraid. Afraid of what? James hesitated. Afraid that you would lose what was really important in life. The connections, the people, the moments that don't come back. Daniel lowered his eyes. And I did. For a while I lost all of that. But you found it again. Through Emily. And through you. James smiled and squeezed his son's shoulder. I like seeing how you are with her. Patient, present, a better father than I was. You were a great father, the best you could have been under the circumstances. I could have done more. I could have understood your dreams better, supported your ambitions more. And I could have valued what you gave me more. The values, the character, the example of hard work. They looked at each other with the understanding that only time can bring. The hurts of the past no longer had power over them. I wish I had met Sarah, James said after a while. Emily's mother. She would have liked you. She was a simple, straightforward person. She valued the right things. What was she like? Daniel smiled at the memory. Strong, determined, but kind, too. She had a way of seeing the world that made me want to be better. She was the one who taught me to slow down, to enjoy the small moments. I'm sorry Emily couldn't have known her longer. Me too. But now Emily has a grandfather, and that's a gift I never thought I could give her. James nodded, moved. Do you know what I want to do with you two? What? I want to go back to the park, to that bench. Daniel understood immediately. To close the circle. No, to start a new one. A circle where we are together, where Emily can have the grandfather she deserves. Daniel smiled. Tomorrow, the three of us. The next morning, the sun was shining brightly when they left the house. Emily walked in the middle, holding Daniel's and James's hands. She skipped between them, excited about the outing. No phones, no distractions, no weight of the past. The three of them walked through the park. Emily told imaginary stories about the squirrels in the trees, about the clouds in the sky. James listened to every word with genuine attention, asking questions, feeding his granddaughter's imagination. The bench where it all began was there, but they didn't need to sit. They stopped in front of it for a moment, the three of them together, acknowledging the importance of that simple place. There were no grand speeches, no solemn lessons. The reconciliation had already happened, and it was visible in the way they walked together, the way they looked at each other, the way they shared smiles and small gestures. Daniel smiled at James. James looked at Emily, and everything was in its right place. Daddy, Grandpa, look! Emily pointed to a blue bird on a nearby branch, just like in the story Grandpa told. That's right, James said. Remember the story, Emily? About the little bird that flew far away and then came home, she completed proudly. Because home is where the love is. Daniel and James exchanged a deep look. They didn't need to say anything more. The story was complete. The circle had closed. They continued walking through the park, 3 generations united, the past reconciled, the present full, the future open before them. Emily ran ahead, chasing a yellow butterfly. Daniel and James followed her side by side, in the same rhythm, in the same harmony. Thank you, Daniel said simply. For what? For waiting, for not giving up. James smiled, his eyes following Emily. It was worth every minute, he replied. Every second. Some reunions don't need words. Sometimes, all it takes is a shared snack, a look of recognition, a simple gesture of generosity. And everything that was lost finds its way back, through love, and for the one who never stopped waiting. The Carter family moved forward, now complete, now whole. And as they walked under the sun of that perfect morning, the empty bench was left behind, no longer a symbol of waiting and loneliness, but a silent monument to the power of forgiveness and the ability of love to heal even the deepest wounds. Do you know what I feel now, son? James asked as they watched Emily play with other children on the playground. What, Dad? Peace. For the first time in 15 years, I feel peace. Daniel smiled, feeling the same in his heart. A cycle of pain had ended, and a new cycle of healing and joy was beginning. And at the center of this new cycle was Emily, the bond that united past and future, the child who had brought grandfather and father back home with a simple hot dog and a heart full of kindness. She's special, Daniel said, watching his daughter. She is, James agreed. She has the best of us. Your mother's kindness, your determination, my curiosity. It's as if the universe gave us a second chance through her. A second chance